All right, given that we're in the midst of distance learning, I thought I would go ahead and do some of my lectures just quickly online since we don't have time to do them in class. Right now we're doing chapter 14, the expansive realm of Islam, and we're going to do the first heading, a prophet and his world. Some of the things to really pay attention to is in this section, we'll learn about how Islam, Judaism, and Christianity are the core beliefs, and the core beliefs and practices of these religions continue to shape societies in Africa and Asia. They already started in the classical time period, and they do through this next one as well. And then that's the primary one that we'll do in this area. We'll also talk a little bit about military expansion. Okay, so you can't talk about Islam without talking about Muhammad. So he is born to a merchant family, but he's orphaned very young. He ends up marrying a wealthy widow and works for her as a merchant, and then basically takes over. The world of Arabia at this point is going to be very familiar with a lot of different religions. So there's going to be definitely Christians, Jews, Zoroastrians, and a whole series of different pagan religions. Pagan basically means a religion which is outside of an organized large religion like Christianity, Judaism, Islam, so on and so forth. So those are going to be practiced throughout. So Muhammad is going to have a vision in 610 CE where he is going to believe that he's going to be visited by the Archangel Gabriel. And Gabriel is going to tell him that basically he's going to be the seal of the prophets. He reveals to him that the religions of that day had it wrong and that he was the messenger of Allah, who is the one and only or supreme God, and that he needed to have a monotheistic worldview. Muhammad starts talking about these things and starts attracting followers to Mecca. Now, these revelations that Muhammad was given are going to be recorded in something called the koo-RAHN. Now, the koo-RAHN is written after Muhammad dies, but we need to understand that back then the oral tradition was much stronger. So it was not unheard of for people to memorize things word for word, vast passages, because they had to. That was the way you would do it. Another book that'll be very important is not only the Quran, which is the written, basically, words of God to Muhammad, is the Hadith, which is the traditions of Muhammad's life. So it's basically the story of Muhammad, the decisions he made, and how he lived. So Muhammad's belief in Islam and this belief in Allah is going to make things incredibly difficult for him. Mecca itself is going to be a huge trade center, and it's going to be basically a spot that a lot of different religions will go to on pilgrimages. And so Muhammad saying that there were no other gods or that any other spirits is far below Allah is going to be not only religiously offensive, but it's going to be economically offensive. The other thing that he's going to do is he's going to denounce greed, and which is also going to get him in trouble with the local rich people in Mecca. He's a merchant. He does believe in fair profit, but he is not going to be profit for the sake of profit above all else. So what's going to happen is eventually in 622, Muhammad is forced to flee to Yathrib, or what we would call Medina. Your book calls this the Hijra. When I looked it up online, it looked like it's actually Hijira, which just might be a different pronunciation. So I'm going to use Hijira because that seems to be more accurate. This event is going to be so important. It's going to be year zero in the Muslim calendar, because this is when Muhammad really formally organizes the Ummah, or like the communal society of all Muslims. He is going to create their legal and spiritual code. So he's not only going to be the religious leader, but their political leader. He's also going to be their military leader, because unfortunately they're not going to be able to have enough resources for themselves. And so they will actually, unfortunately, they will raid some of the caravans which are going to be going to Mecca to try to feed themselves and take care of themselves. Muhammad, as I mentioned before, is seen as the seal of the prophet, which means kind of like you're sealing off a cavern or you're sealing off a bottle. And so the revelation that he believes Allah gives him is the culmination and correction of Judaism in Christianity. So whereas he sees it as the Islam as the inheritance or the culmination of those religions. So there's some respect for what he would call people of the book, but definitely Islam has some teachings which are not believed by Jews or Christians. So as Islam is growing and as he's having some success leading his people, in 630, he believes it's time for them to go and reclaim Mecca. So what he's going to do is they're going to attack Mecca and they're going to win, converting it officially to Islam. There's also going to be a lot of destruction of pagan sites, or basically any religion that's not associated with Islam. And so they're going to destroy it and replace it with mosques, or basically their versions of their buildings like churches. The thing that is going to be preserved, though, is going to be the Kaaba, which is going to be important for Mecca in general. And so it's going to be designated as a pilgrimage site. So before, a lot of religions were coming to Mecca for basically pilgrimages and to worship. And so all of that is going to be turned into Islam. So the Kaaba is a very impressive structure. The Hagia Sophia, also in the Byzantine Empire, will be one that's left alone as well. But the Kaaba is going to be left alone and basically converted to a Muslim site. What's important to note is that there is, from a Western perspective, we normally talk about the 5 pillars of Islam. These 5 teachings are pretty central to most Muslims, but I've had a few Muslims tell me that they are not just solely 5, that some have fewer, some have more, depending on how they practice their religion. But these are pretty safe to know. The first one is that there is the belief that there is no God but Allah, and Muhammad is his prophet. So Allah is the supreme God, or only God. Muhammad is the only prophet that should be listened to. Any prophet that goes against Muhammad is one you shouldn't listen to. The second is daily prayers, and so if you go to many Muslim countries, you will hear the call to prayer several times during the day, and so you're supposed to stop and face Mecca and pray. They also believe in fasting, especially during the season of Ramadan, where they fast from all food and water, even water during the day, and then at sundown they come together to eat. And so it's a great bonding time because you've all been doing something that is difficult, and then you get together to eat and to share what Allah has shared with you that day. Another big component for most Muslims is the idea of charity or almsgiving. So basically giving to those who can't afford it, who can't take care of themselves. Again, Muhammad had been an orphan. His wife actually was originally a widow, and so that is going to be an important part for most Muslims in celebrating their religion. And then the last one is the pilgrimage to Mecca, or the Hajj. And the Hajj can also incorporate Medina as well. So it's again, kind of like the fasting during Ramadan. It is something that binds Muslims together. They are expected to go on a Hajj unless they are incredibly sick, or unless there's no money to do so. The Hajj is also a great time of charity. If you can get yourself there, then from what I understand, a lot of things can be taken care of from you. So if you're poor, you can still go. And it's I have never been, only Muslims are allowed to attend it from what I understand. But from what I understand, it's a great bonding moment. Muslims will always remember and talk about their Hajj if they don't get to go multiple times. And again, this is a scene of Muslims at prayer. So another thing that kind of binds these people together. Probably one of the most controversial, there's 2 really controversial things normally when Westerners talk about Islam. And the first one is the concept of jihad. And jihad, depending on the Muslim you're talking to, will argue it's one of many different things. On one level, some people will argue that jihad is the struggle against vice, is the struggle to do what it is that that Allah wants you to do. And many religions have this type of struggle. There are other Muslims who will argue that no, jihad is not just that struggle internally to do the right thing. It's the struggle against the ignorance of Islam, so that they must be missionaries. They must try to convert people to Islam. And then other people will say that no, the holy war that jihad is talking about is not just trying to convert, but um, doing violence against those who aren't Muslim, and that is a minority of Muslims, from what I understand, and a very small minority of them. But again, as a teacher, I can't just. You'll notice throughout this year, I can't just teach what is nice or what seems good. I will always talk about the things which are good, the things which are bad, so you can make your own judgments. The other thing that's can be quite controversial with Muslims is the idea of Sharia law, which is anytime you try to take Muslim teachings and codify it into a secular law that everyone must follow. So it's based, Sharia law is always based off of the teachings of the Quran, also the Hadith, or the life of Muhammad, the example he set, and then just this whole huge amounts of like logical schools of analysis, all these other ideas and these traditions that have gone over time. What's interesting about this is that this law isn't just about the religion, but goes through all areas of human activity, and obviously looks at ideas of kind of like the precedents that were set. They can obviously use any sort of modern technology. It's the kind of the spirit of how Muhammad lived his life, and the traditions is what goes through it. It is important to note that Sharia law isn't just one law. Sharia law is different depending on the different parts of the Muslim world you are in. And with that, that's the end for heading 1.